back at it again, and man, does it feel good to say that. Been a while. It's been a while. How you guys been? How you been? Apparently, there's been a lot that's been going on, okay? Before we hop into the video, I do want to say thank you to everyone that, sent their well wishes and prayers for my speedy recovery, and I'm well on my way. Obviously, I'm not 100%. I mean, I feel fine, but my throat's still a little itchy. Got a little bit of a cough going on, so if you hear me like hacking up a lung, I do apologize, all right? I do apologize. I'm going to apologize in advance if I start coughing, okay? She finally got me. She finally got me, guys. She finally got me. Goodness gracious. But anyway, obviously we got a lot to discuss today. A lot of different topics to discuss. I was like, man, what should I touch on first? Obviously we have the Tyre Nichols situation that has to be touched on. All right, like, share, comment, hit that subscribe button if you're new, and let's dive in.
Well, as we said, that video is hard to watch. Parts of it are brutal. It seems like an abuse of power. You can't kick a man when he's on the ground, handcuffed. Decent people oppose that. Virtually all Americans oppose that. We should also remember that we don't know all the facts here.
Yeah, I'm going to blur out this video for obvious reasons. We're going to try to keep it somewhat PG around here. That video is pretty gruesome. If you want to watch it for yourself, feel free. But yeah, I'm probably going to blur this out.
Seen a lot of videos over the years that have been put to uses that had nothing to do with the topic of the video itself. So we should suspend some level of judgment, but that video is awful in a lot of ways. But here's what it's not. It's not an example of racism, systemic or otherwise. The man on the ground who was killed or died in any case was black, but so was every police officer you just saw hitting him. So, by the way, is the police chief of Memphis. So is most of its city government. So also is the overwhelming majority of the city of Memphis itself. So whatever you think of them, white people did not play any role in this particular tragedy. Whatever the story may be about, it's not about racial bias.
Oh, but the left, they're going to spin it to make it sound like, oh, no good, very bad white man. Just wait on it.
Any honest person could see that immediately. But you would never know it from watching the so-called news coverage of this tape today. The only person whose race most media outlets identified was the victim. Another unarmed black man murdered by the police, they said. Moments ago on MSNBC, they just described what you just saw as white supremacy.
I'll give more of my thoughts and opinion when Tucker is finished with this segment, all right?
Really, how? CNN's Van Jones did acknowledge that the police who hit Tyre Nichols were black, but, quote, they might still have been driven by racism. Van Jones didn't take the time to explain how. It was a lie, of course. They're all lying. And Joe Biden himself, the President of the United States, swiftly reinforced that lie. Referring to an event in which every single participant and their supervisors was the same color, Biden lectured the United States that, quote, fatal encounters with law enforcement have disparately impacted black and brown people. So the one thing we know, no matter how you feel about the video, and most people don't think that's right, but the one thing we know for sure is that there is a highly aggressive propaganda campaign underway tonight designed to manipulate you and using the sad death of a young man in Memphis to do it. That propaganda campaign, like all propaganda campaigns, is by definition dishonest.
Sure is.
But it's more than that. It's worse than that. This is yet another attempt by our leaders of our country to inflame racial hatred in the United States. Why would anyone ever do that? The consequences of doing that ripple through the generations. They don't go away.
Nah, they want to do it to anger people, to get people to go out and cast those ballots. Remember when we talked about the whole abortion issue? When they could have resolved the issue, they could have fixed it for the folks, right? But no, they knew the court was going to overturn Roe v. Wade. They knew that. They didn't care. They wanted them to. They wanted their constituents to be out in the streets angry. Y'all remember right after it happened, they were all out in the streets. Instead of in their offices, putting their heads together, putting some paperwork together, They were out in the streets. We're gonna fight. You're not fighting for anything. You're literally not fighting for anything. You're saying you're gonna fight. If you were actually fighting, you would be in your office. You're not an MMA fighter. What are you talking about? Fight. We're gonna fight. We'll get your behind in your office. Let's get this paperwork going. Like, what are you talking about? And people still eat this stuff up. That's the crazy thing. I'm just like, man, box of rocks, I tell you. They're as dumb as it.
Quickly. But they're doing it anyway. Why? We can't say for certain, but we can't help but notice that the last time we had race riots in this country, an incumbent president, lost re-election. There was a point. So Joe Biden, if he weren't senile, might be concerned by this. But whatever the intent of lying about what you just saw might be, we know that it's evil. And we are beginning to suspect that the violence expected in Memphis tonight is not organic. It's not just outraged people taking to the streets. Why are we guessing that? Because similar violence is also expected tonight in cities across the country. As we speak, Antifa is coordinating riots on both coasts and in between. That would include Seattle and Portland, Oregon, and Los Angeles, California, as well as Atlanta, Georgia, New York City, suburban Washington, D.C., et cetera, et cetera. Barricades are going up right now in Times Square. The NYPD is worried about attacks on police and potentially public transportation. Our rage is stronger than their power, declared the Antifa chapter in Frederick, Maryland. Of course, by morning we'll know if that's true, but we already know there's a lie embedded in the claim. Our rage? We get so mad watching CNN that we took to the streets and set police stations on fire or whatever they plan to do? No. That's not what's happening. Antifa is not a bunch of hooligans. These are not idle kids who just appear out of nowhere because they're so mad about what they saw on cable news or read on Twitter. Antifa is a political instrument whose actions always are intended to affect a political outcome. Period. Antifa does not appear by accident. Antifa appears with a purpose to affect a political outcome every single time. And if there's one criticism of the rest of us watching this at home, it's that we often miss that. Because every channel is telling us something terrible happened, here's a video of it, and sometimes the video is terrible. And then they imply that because of this video, the emotions of the people watching just erupt into rage and violence. But that's not what's happening. Antifa is being organized by whom? We don't know. Why don't we know? To do what? We can't say right now. But we know for certain that in cities across the country right now, Antifa is mobilizing to commit violence. This is a political militia. So the question is, who's benefiting from it? Those are the people you ought to be asking questions of, and we're going to have time to do that. But right now, we are on the cusp of what many in law enforcement expect to be a long and violent evening.
So, man, where do I even begin with that? Actually, you know what? We're going to jump into this clip that he briefly touched on with Van Jones, all right? Because Van Jones said something that was you know, I'm sorry, but just when you thought these folks couldn't get any crazier, right? They managed to pull it off. People like Van Jones might need to be put in a straitjacket soon. I don't know what's going on. Listen to what he says.
5 black officers charged in the killing of an unarmed black man. Now, we often have conversations, Van, about the element of race and the racial dynamic in policing. But I think we all know quite well that when it comes to power, blue trumps black. The idea of the race of the person who is victimized, often more telling than the race of the aggressor. What is your reaction?
Yeah, I think it's really important because there's this very simplistic notion that says, well, if a white cop is doing something to an unarmed black person, then that's racism. But we sometimes forget, unfortunately, African Americans can also be guilty of hatred and bias and bigotry against other African Americans. Sometimes you go into a store that's owned by an African American, they're nice to the white folks and suspicious of you. It's not that only one group can harbor anti-black bias. It's so pervasive. And so the other thing that happens is certain neighborhoods are just considered almost by some police departments war zones. Anything goes over there. You know, just do what you have to do. And so black officers can pick up on those kinds of cues, those kinds of signals when nobody gets in trouble for acting a certain way in this neighborhood versus in a white neighborhood. So race is an element here. I can't imagine any police officers delivering that kind of brutal beating to a white male U.S. citizen. Can you imagine if you had 5 black officers doing that? It's very hard to imagine. I think what has happened is we've become accustomed, black and white officers, to a certain amount of inhumanity being directed in certain neighborhoods with certain suspects, and you saw that play out today.
Now, I will say this. Is the loss of life tragic? Absolutely. We can all say that, right? And even when I was laughing there, I wasn't laughing at the loss of life. I was laughing at how ignorant he sounded when he said what he said. But at the same time, right? And I've watched the video, and once again, I'm gonna blur it out in this clip. We're gonna keep it somewhat PG, okay? You can go watch it for yourself. Actually, I'm probably sure you already have seen it. And there was an extra piece of the video that came out where, they had the camera angle from a pole across the street or something, a light post or lamp, something. And yeah, it was crazy. Okay. Now, in that video, what it looked like to me was somebody wasn't listening to the orders that were being given from police officers. Now, does that excuse police officers for doing all of what they did? No, absolutely not. Because some of the stuff they did, whoa. Like I said, I'm going to try to keep it somewhat PG here, okay? You can only imagine. I mean, the guy did lose his life. So, no bullets were fired, and he lost his life. So, yeah, you can only imagine what happened to this man if you haven't seen the video. It does not excuse the officers for the level that they went to, but there's also a more important thing that we could talk about here, and that's do what they're telling you to do. Even if you, and we can go back to the video with Larry Elder. Excuse me. Larry Elder talked about, even if you feel the officer is wrong, do what he's telling you to do, and you'll figure out the rest and deal with the rest later on. The goal is to make it home. That should always be the goal. Go back through your front door the same way you walked out of it. And fighting and resisting a police officer is not a great way to go about that. I'm just saying. That's just a fact. How many times do we have to watch a video like this for people to click in their heads? Stop trying to resist. Do what they tell you to do, even if you feel that they are wrong. Just do it. Do it. Sue them later. All right? Because we've seen these videos play out time and time again. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. We've seen this movie before. We've seen it plenty of times. Guy resists arrest. Guy gets hurt. Footage of it comes out. Oh, everybody's out. We've seen this a million times, so why do we keep going back to it? That's my question. Is the loss of life tragic? Yes. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. But from what it looked like to me, now listen, maybe maybe I didn't see everything correctly. That's possible. Maybe the audio was messed up. Very, very possible. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But like I said, it looked like someone himself wasn't listening to their orders. That's what it looked like and sounded like to me. Like I said, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got the facts messed up. You guys can, let me know in the comment section. But that's what it looked like and sounded like to me. And like I said, the goal should always be to make it back home the same way you walked out. That's my mindset. The same way I walk out of my front door is the same way I want to walk back in. And fighting with a cop is not conducive to that happening. That's just common sense, I feel. Like, no, I'm not going to fight with a cop. Yeah, you might be wrong. I might be angry. I might even shout a profanity at you. All right? You stupid, if I'm angry enough. But I'm going to do what you tell me to do. I'm going to lay on my stomach, hands behind my back, whatever, hands on my head, whatever. Hands 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. I'm not going to move. Okay? I'm not going to give you any type of excuse to do what it is that I've seen some officers do, like we saw in that video. Now, on to the Van Jones situation. The fact that these leftists continue to try to throw race into everything is just absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous. Every chance they get, they claim to care. They claim to not care about race so much and love everybody. But every chance that they get, they throw race into it. Every chance. You just heard Van Jones say that black people are racist against black people. I'm just like, oh man, oh goodness gracious, and like, I don't know, man. I don't know. The cops are wrong. They've been charged, all right, with murder, 2nd-degree murder, I believe it was. So, yeah, justice is being served, as it should. They were definitely wrong. But at the same time, it's almost a situation, and I feel, part of me feels bad for officers, not for those officers, because they went above and beyond, what they should have done. But part of me feels bad for officers because now there's really, really a gray area, right? And like I said before, it's part of the reason why I could never be a cop because, hey, listen, I'm making it home, and yeah. Anyway, obviously a tragic situation, but a lot of lessons to be learned, and hopefully, finally, people will learn the lesson, do what the officer tells you to do, so you make it back home. If you feel that they're wrong, you deal with it later. And if any of these leaders, so-called leaders, I don't consider them leaders, but the people that they call leaders, I don't even need to say names. If they truly consider themselves leaders, they would be out here telling people that message. We've seen this movie before. Stop replaying it. Stop replaying it. Do what the officers tell you to do. It's that simple. Even if you feel they're wrong, you can go back and fix that situation later. You can't fix it when you're in a pine box. Peace and love. I'm out.